You can move it at the speed of light on the Lightning Network. You can program it with 1 million transactions a second. You can have 100 million computers speaking to each other every day. And the velocity on that money is something that is just, never seen before.
Sure. Can you explain? Sure. Can you explain to people what why it's so important for the balance sheet to put Bitcoin on it?
Yeah. So the idea, the problem is Bitcoin is currently deemed by GAAP accounting in the U.S. as an indefinite intangible asset. And that means if you buy $1 billion of it, you're required every second of the day to shop for the lowest bidder. And on a Saturday night in Singapore, if someone wanted to pay you 30% less for that, you have to mark down the entire $1 billion by 30%. And so you take a $300 million write-off and becomes an operating loss in the quarter in question. Then you carry $700 million on your balance sheet forever. And if it goes up to be worth 10 billion, you're still showing 700 million in asset, and the 9.3, which is the additional market value, is not shown in a GAAP accounting statement. You won't see it ever reflected in the P&L. You won't see it reflected in the balance sheet, which means the company that has $10 billion of Bitcoin in the quarter where Bitcoin price doubles has exactly the same P&L results as a company with $1 of Bitcoin in the quarter where the price doubles. So there's no transparency to any investor. It's problematic. And of course, if you're a casual investor, you can't really understand the financial situation of the company without extensive pro forma schedules. So as a practical matter, a public company needs to create pro forma non-GAAP operating income schedules to relate the non-GAAP results to the EPS results. And then you need to provide people enough information for them to do their own calculation about how much asset you really have. There are other accounting treatments, other accounting systems where they wouldn't do it that way. They would treat it as a financial asset, and you would mark it to market. And so if you held Bitcoin in a fund, if I had a mutual fund and it was backed by Bitcoin and the price of Bitcoin doubled and the fund doubled, I would actually mark it up and I would take investment income and I would actually mark it on my balance sheet, because fund accounting is different than commodity and Bitcoin accounting and property accounting. And if I was a foreign company with a different accounting standard than FASB, then I might very well carry this as a financial asset. So the summary there is, what that does is it advantages the individual, because the individuals don't concern themselves with GAAP, so they're advantaged. It advantages private companies because they're not concerned. It advantages institutional investors because they have a different accounting treatment. And it advantages foreign companies that have a different accounting treatment than the FASB GAAP treatment in the US. It disadvantages publicly traded US companies under FASB GAAP accounting. And it makes it challenging for Apple Computer to buy $25 billion worth of Bitcoin, because you would end up with the volatility of Bitcoin washing through your P&L, creating optical confusion. Then you have to pro forma it out. And so if you're a very conservative CFO, you would think, maybe I'm just going to keep this to 1%, 2%, 3% of my balance sheet. If your concern is just make the right economic decision, then you wouldn't make it based upon that indefinite intangible. You'd make it based upon, pro forma cash flow rational, right? So that's the issue. I think that the U.S. industry and the U.S. investors will benefit if that accounting gets reviewed at some point in the future. Well, I think the analogy with Bitcoin is the greatest city in cyberspace, constructed of 21 million blocks of encrypted energy. So it's Manhattan in cyberspace. One day, billions and billions of people want to live there. you want to develop the 21st century economy on that digital property. And once you bought one Bitcoin, you bought 1/21 millionth. You've got one block in cyber Manhattan, maybe for all of eternity. There's no reason why Bitcoin can't go on for 1,000 years. They'll keep upgrading the nodes and upgrading the software and upgrading the hardware. But the idea is pretty much, who owns the 21 million blocks of cyber Manhattan? And owning cyber Manhattan is actually more valuable than owning Manhattan. Because if you bought up all Manhattan, every block around Central Park, that would have been pretty valuable because that was the greatest city in America. But there was Paris and Tokyo, and there was London, and there was Beijing, and they all had something to recommend them if you were Chinese or Japanese or French or British. On the other hand, when you're buying Bitcoinville or cyber Manhattan, everybody wants to own a block in the greatest city in cyberspace. Doesn't matter where you live. Doesn't matter what language you speak. It doesn't matter what culture you come out of. No one is prohibited. And so why wouldn't you want to own Central Park in the greatest property on earth? Especially because, Brian, you need that property as the granite upon which to build the banks, the insurance companies, the exchanges, and the retailers in cyberspace in the 21st century. So when you own $1 billion of Bitcoin, you can move it at the speed of light on the Lightning Network. You can program it with 1 million transactions a second. You can have 100 million computers speaking to each other every day. And the velocity on that money is something that is just, never seen before. We can't move gold around that fast. We can't move you can't move $1 billion with Apple stock around that fast. You can't program it. So Bitcoin represents the critical property to build the new age economy, and it's the dominant network, and you get to show up 100 years before everybody else understands that, of course, this is the thing. That's what's exciting. What's most impressive to me about Bitcoin is learning about the second order effects of an open monetary network. I mean, Bitcoin is a digital monetary asset on an open, permissionless network. And because it's decentralized and no company and no country owns it, it's really a thing for the world. So I don't think there's any other asset that I can think of where every intelligent person that understands it decides to start doing everything they can to make it more valuable. And that's a subtlety. If we had bought 1 million acres of land in Texas, I wouldn't have computer programmers in Singapore trying to figure out how to drive up the value of my land in Texas. And if we had bought $1 billion worth of Apple stock, I wouldn't have people in China and Russia and Europe and South America figuring out how to harness the power of volcanoes in order to drive up the value of my Apple stock. I wouldn't have the mayor of Miami, the governor of Texas, the president of El Salvador. You wouldn't have big tech companies trying to figure out how to, drive up the value of that asset. So unlike gold or bonds or equity or real estate, this is truly a global open phenomena. Anybody can participate in it. If you have money, you can bring the money to bear to drive up the value of the asset by buying it. If you have technology like Square or PayPal, you can bring the technology to bear by integrating Bitcoin into your technology, helping yourself and the asset. If you're a trader, you can short the future, buy the spot, lock up the asset, drive up the price of the asset. And you can do that anywhere in the world. So everybody that has any gift or any ambition looking to do something good for their own company and to build a better world, I think as soon as they see Bitcoin, this light bulb goes off and they realize, wait a minute, this is maybe the greatest opportunity of my lifetime. And I knew it was, when we bought it a year ago, we bought it as digital gold. And we thought, well, this is a better gold than gold. And I've waxed philosophic about that many times. But I think that the thing that came in the next 12 months is not just digital gold, it's digital gold on an open monetary network, which means that hundreds of millions of people are going to be thinking really hard about how they enhance the value of that gold. And because you can program it, and because you can upgrade it, and because you can integrate it into an insurance company or an exchange or a mobile app or a device or a government or a corporation or an insurance policy, that means that you've just got every intelligent, progressive person on earth that understands it, figuring out how to upgrade it. I don't think you can say that about anything else on this earth.